Welcome to a very special edition of Uplink. I'm Alexander Milas, and so pleased to be joined by my old friend, co-founder of Space Rocks, Mark McCorcoran. It has been a while, Mark.
I didn't even want to go and look in the calendar and see when the last one was. 3 years, maybe? I mean, as you know, we've talked about this many times. Somehow we managed to do two uplinks a week at the beginning of the pandemic because, nobody had anything to do. And then it petered off. Well, petered off is the wrong thing. We did one a week for quite a while and then got a little bit irregular. But yeah, here we are. What is it? Show 65? Something like that.
It's up there, but we wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't a special occasion. It's nostalgic, I think, for both of us to revisit Uplink, but I think it's also a really good reason to do so, which is, of course, the discussion of Stephen's brand new album. That's, of course, Stephen Wilson and the overview. We're going to be joined just in a couple of minutes by ESA solar physicist Miho Janvier, as well as the editor of Prog, Jerry Ewing. But first things first, Mark. Why do you think it's such a interesting turn of creative events for Stephen?
Of course, we've talked about this a lot and been thinking about this for a long time. And I think I mentioned to you earlier this week, in his previous album, The Harmony Codex, the title track actually starts talking about the scale of the universe and, how many million miles it is from here to there, and how many light years across the universe is. So, and I think that probably was before you spoke to him about the overview effect as such. And when we talked to Stephen, well, again, whenever it was, 3 or 4 years ago on Uplink, he was clearly interested. I mean, he came on the show, but it was a subject we discussed. That kind of cosmic perspective, that cosmic vertigo, as I call it, that contemplating the scale of the universe gives you. Now, I think from what he said, the pandemic triggered a few things. The sense of isolation, being kind of locked away from the world, triggered even more reflection. It's a little bit in the zeitgeist as well, talking about space, although not always in a positive way, in a sense, right? I mean, we've gone to private space and we've talked many times about the pros and cons of some of that aspect. So I think he had a lot on his mind, I think, and this created a channel for him to discuss many of those things in a kind of oblique way, but very connected through the things we've been talking about, the scale of space and the immensity, the tininess that we are and the scale that the universe has.
Indeed, I suppose as he once said, so much of his music has been about inner space, but anything about space is always about what's down here as well. So joining us now are Miho and Jerry, who are coming in from the waiting room. They've been patiently, probably listening to us. I suspect with an opinion or two about the record as well. So let's take a moment for them to join. And I think first up, we're joined by Miho. What an absolute pleasure it is to see you again. And Jerry, thank you so much for making the time to join us as well. How are you guys doing?
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Very good, thanks.
Been a long time since I've seen you, Jerry.
Yes.
And Miho, of course, just a couple of weeks ago when we were in London for the premiere event. But good to see you, sir. It's been a while.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you?
Not here, not in outer space, but I've moved location from the Netherlands to Germany since we last spoke, and just been out in the woods filming some stuff for Alex. So it's all good.
Great stuff. Great.
Indeed. Well, we were just remarking, Jerry, that we haven't done Uplink in a little while, but it would only be something of the magnitude of Stephen Wilson doing a two-track prog record about outer space that would be titanic enough to bring us back. First things first, look, you are the guru of prog, the editor of a fantastic publication. Jerry, give it to us straight. What do you think of the record?
I think it's fantastic. You know, um, as as a Stephen Wilson fan, I've enjoyed his career both with Porcupine Tree and solo. Um, he moves around creatively. Um, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that from my artists. I was slightly surprised when he told me that he was going to go down this specific route for this album, but I was also delighted because obviously that's going to float my boat a bit more than some of the other things he may have done. And when he explained what the concept was as well, I mean, I thought that was absolutely fantastic too, and it seemed timely. What with all manner of things going on space wise these days, and it being much more in the public's conscience as well.
Mm.
Indeed.
I mean, one thing you've talked about a lot, Jerry, is kind of the cult of prog. Maybe I mean, maybe that's not the right phrase, right? If it ain't the way I like prog, it's not prog. Now, I mean, Stephen has challenged that many times, I would say, and and his fans have come and gone a little bit on that. And I think you've been very strong in your support. He should choose whatever direction he likes. But this is, I don't know, is it Tales of Topographic Oceans for 2025?
I reviewed it for Prog, and I kind of said it was we are what we're looking at is very much a 21st century progressive record.
Yeah.
In that, I mean, there are small elements of sound that evoke memories of other things, but that's not the overriding factor on the record, I don't think. I think, I mean, we've heard that before from some of Stephen's solo material, but with this, I think he's very much positioned long form music in a very modern context. I think that's a really, that's a big thing with this record. Um, and I mean, inevitably, how he quite managed to get the concept into just two tracks, I don't know. I mean, he could have gone on and on, I think, a bit like space itself.
Indeed. Well, I mean, I guess, with that, we should shift toward to Miho. Of course, Miho, it's such a pleasure to have you join us for a panel discussion after the playback at the BFI just a couple of short weeks ago. And, I suppose you spent a lot of time with the record, in preparation for that. What were your impressions of the record? What did it make you think about? And do you think he's really addressed that issue of scale that Jerry talks about?
I guess there's a I would say a before and after the movie that accompanies the music preview. At the beginning, I was kind of intrigued. I was like really listening to the progression over the course of those two tracks, and I wasn't so much focused on the science and the space aspect of it. I was more into the that's really interesting. It reminded me of certain bands that I used to listen some time ago. I'm a huge fan of Pink Floyd, and never knew that there was actually prog rock. So I kind of discovered this naming of things that I actually really, really like to listen to. Um, and I think the space aspect really came after watching the movie that accompanies it, that we all watched at the BFI. Um, and for me, the most intriguing thing is like, how does he come up with the music ideas? And I think I shared that with you. Is that it left me with a hunger to understand what was his journey and how was he able to translate that into music. And I'm still left with trying to know that really.
That's a really really good point. And I myself, when I obviously like Alex over the years, I've interviewed many musicians. When they're dealing with something that's conceptual and they've had the seed of an idea that's kicked everything off. That's one thing. You've got the idea, but how do you translate that into the first piece of music? Where do you start even? That always absolutely intrigues me.
Mm.
I mean,
And
sorry, go on,
sorry.
Mia. Go on.
Oh no, I also wanted to say that it's also this feedback, like uh, as a scientist, and I think Mike, you do the same as well. But I actually like to work with music, not all the time, but sometimes music actually inspires me. And after listening and again, I have to say that it also has inspired me to continue my work in certain ways. And yeah, I kind of want to thank him for that as well on a personal note. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, it's a question, isn't it? Of course, Miho, one of the things that really resonated, which you're saying on the night and here now, is just that people can forget that it's humans, who do this, of course, and the world of science and space science is populated by people who feel things, and there is a very human dimension to the work itself and the response that it inspires. But, creatively, and this is a bit of a loaded question, because we have tried to be diverse when it comes to the sort of music that we include in the world of space rocks and all that kinds of things. But why do you think it is, Jerry, that prog and space seem to make such natural bedfellows. Or is that just my bias? Am I completely wrong about that? Am I just wrong in that sort of presumption?
Well, my joke answer to that is because they both go on forever. Um, if I can cast your mind back, Alex, to when we were colleagues, you on Metal Hammer and myself on Prog Magazine, and you were telling me about your idea for Space Rocks, that you wanted to do this thing. You know, you were at that point where you were you were moving on from Metal Hammer to sort of where you are now, and you had this idea for Space Rocks, and you were saying, and I was just totally bought into it. I was like, this is fantastic. Count us in for anything you want to do, because nothing works better musically, I think, than prog and space. You know, I mean, it's because I think there's a big conceptual thing behind a lot of progressive rock. Okay. And nothing inspires man, I think, more than anything than what he doesn't know, the quest to learn. And nothing sort of says that more than space. You know, it is the great unknown. Um, I think they say that uh, it's only underwater that's on Earth that is the great sort of undiscovered. The man's discovered most things about the planet apart from sea, and they kind of say that that's the sort of like it's the equivalent to space, but in a much smaller kind of area, as it were. And also, man spent millions and millions of years staring up at the skies, and it's inspired him, it's terrified him. It poses questions that he's never been able to answer. And I think that just fits better. I mean, it's not exclusive to prog, but I think it fits. The fit is much more perfect with progressive music.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also say, of course, classical music has a very big history with its link to
Yeah.
space. You know, of course, Kubrick famously, the Blue Danube, but then also Ligeti in the same film in 2001: A Space Odyssey. So very atonal classical. And
Oh,
prog
oh,
owes a lot to classical music, one can argue as well, in
oh,
terms of long form
Sopranos
development. Yeah.
Mm.
is
So
another example. But yeah, as you say, Mark, there's a much stronger link, I think, between prog and classical music than classical music probably shares. Probably a bit with heavy metal, but heavy metal and prog are very closely linked anyway.
Hmm.
yeah.
Indeed.
I, if I may say, I also see that as a journey. I think it's also having had the chance to kind of try to analyze the album as well. But I really, the change in terms of the rhythm, the tones, I can see again, and maybe it's overanalyzing, but I can see some parallels with the work that we do in science, where sometimes it's like the oh wow, these are new data, and what we're looking is oh, it's amazing, and then try to get into the analysis of the data that can be a bit rough, and then this bit where we're talking about the scales 10 to the 16, 10 to 20, etc. It's just like trying to understand that from a rational perspective, and so all these different steps that we have in the track, and I think that is also about progressive rock. That I find is a parallel to the way we do science. But yeah, maybe I'm overanalyzing. I don't know whether
Well,
that's how you feel, Marcus.
well, I mean, since I got the obligatory drinking game mention of 2001 in for Uplink, you know, it's sort of a thing Alex and I try to do. What was interesting for me a little bit, and I'd be a little bit careful, and Stephen may actually end up listening to this. What didn't quite work for me was the film and the music simultaneously. I had not seen the film. I had not listened to the music. I went in cold. And if you think about the way that music can soundtrack a film, and of course, sometimes it goes the other way. Light shows, of course, are a big part of many rock concerts. but there was almost too much information content in the two things for me. So I came out and I remember saying to Stephen, he said, "So what do you think?" And I went, "Well," and he immediately sensed that I was hesitant. And so we've been exchanging emails in the last couple of weeks, and every time I listened to it without any visuals, I mean, not that the film's brilliant, but it was almost too much to take in at once. And that complexity has taken time for me. And I'm actually at the point now where I'm cursing him because it's now an earworm. It's actually gone too far, and I'm trying to get it out of my head. So there's the ultimate praise for you, Stephen. At the first listening, it wasn't all there for me, and now it's almost too much. But it's the best kind of music, I think, when that happens.
My first listen without visuals was actually in Stephen's studio. Um, and I was there interviewing him about something completely different. But of course, as always with Stephen, when you go around to see him, it's like, "Hey, do you want to listen to this?" Of course, I wanted to listen to it. That was quite a while before it became a thing that was going to get released. And then I'm lucky enough because obviously we were going to put him on the cover. That I've had the album for quite some time to live with. Before we attended a playback, uh, which were you there, Alex? I think at Acoustics you were,
I
weren't you?
was. Yep.
Where we got half of the visuals because the film was still being made. Um, and having lived with the record for quite a long time, I found it very easy to put
Yeah.
the visuals and the music together. So it's interesting that I don't know if I'd have had the same thing as you had I not. But by that point, the music was very much second nature to my experience of it.
Yeah, and I have the film. I have it on my laptop. Miles sent it to us in advance so we could have a look at it. And I haven't actually watched it. Now I know the music, so I'll go back and do that because it's very difficult as an artist, of course. And this is a separate topic, but it's something we've talked about a lot on Uplink. Is at some point the artist must get sick of their stuff, right? They've been working on it for months. They can't listen to it anymore. And judging how somebody will react the first time. So I think Stephen, of course, he was looking for approval. He wanted people to like it, but it takes time with the best music. Certainly for me, always the best music, the stuff I listen to today and have done for years. Did I like it the first time? Maybe not at that kind of sugar rush level.
But I think this is one of the beautiful things about what Stephen has done, not just with this record, but his whole body of work, is it asks something of you. It isn't immediate, and I think so much of the music these days does, which kind of brings me to a really important point where we are in time right now. So Carl Sagan, this is the other part of the Space Rocks drinking game, is the first mention of Carl Sagan. Used to kind of get accused of using the term billions and billions in all kinds of things. And look, we're in the room with a solar physicist and an astrophysicist, Jerry, and so they're used to really big numbers. But in terms of the likelihood of a two-track prog record about outer space, currently in the running for a UK #1 record, very likely to chart high if it doesn't achieve that. I mean, that is an unbelievable number when it comes to the unlikelihood of that happening. I mean, I never would have believed it unless it was Stephen Wilson, and that's where we are this week.
It's true. And I think it's brilliant that we are. That someone with that kind of scope of imagination and indulging something that is very, very non-commercial in the way that the record industry views commerciality, is in that position. It's a testament to people who believe in art, I think. And people might think I'm being a bit highbrow by using that, but I don't think I am. I mean, only in recent weeks. I mean, you try to get it rammed down your throat because of we're all of a certain age, or certainly Alex, myself. Oscar. You know, we've we've witnessed societal change and social change, and these days we're told that people don't listen to albums, that the album format is dead. Only I think is it Rick Beato was saying this, I think only last week, because people cherry pick stuff and make playlists, and young people who get into music sort of hear stuff but don't not the way that we would have done it, through different social media mediums, I guess. Um, and of course, Stevens made a complete mockery of that. But then again, this is a guy that sat on the sofa of breakfast TV about 5 years ago and talked about the album being a creative journey for the artist and for the listener. And he's right, and he's done it again. You know,
Yeah, I had this weird experience over Christmas. So our kids were back. They came for Christmas. My daughter's working in Edinburgh. Son's a student in Groningen. And as much as they love music, I never really, I don't want to, force your musical tastes on people. Let's put it that way. I mean, and my kids are definitely of the age that they listen to. Not, I don't know, not even judgment. They just don't listen to what I listen to. And almost on the last day that my son was here before he took the train back, I don't even remember what the reason for it was, but I played him one track of Prog, and he immediately said, "Oh, that's really interesting. I can hear the progression here. He instantly started analyzing it from a perspective of a music lover, but somebody who hadn't experienced that kind of music. And I think, Stephen, in that sense, he's open to any music. If you listen to his Album Years podcast, it's incredibly eclectic. He doesn't play any music on the podcast with Tim Bowness because of copyright reasons. But every time the show ends, I rush off and try to, because there are many things I've never heard of. He's a sponge for almost every kind of music. I think there's a few things he doesn't like, but which he's quite open about. But he's absorbed a massive. He'll talk about ABBA as much as he'll talk about music concrete, right? And all of this stuff is in his genes of how he makes music. It seems to me.
Indeed.
it is. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think we're at a place now where young people listen to music with different ears to the way we used to listen to music or got into music. But I genuinely believe that with the new record, whilst it will go a long way to satisfying a lot of his fan base, even probably pulling a few back in who decided his more recent music wasn't for them. Not all of them. I've seen dissent, but that's hey, well, that's social media, and especially the social media within the prog community. But I genuinely believe, because of the way this record sounds, that it actually stands a chance of introducing younger people into more long form music, because it's no disrespect to our good friend Rick Wakeman, but it's not a bloke with a cape playing keyboards for 2 days. It's something that they just haven't heard. When we launched Prog magazine, there still are huge swathes of young bands, very young bands, who play music that fits within the rather wide umbrella of prog. And they all have to get into it at some point. A lot of them found records in parents' record collections. Now, I think we've moved on again to younger people digesting their music in different ways again. But this is the kind of record I think that could excite and inspire young people, because they really aren't going to have heard anything like this.
Indeed. And it's not just the music,
and
of
I think
course.
that's a great thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think musically it stands up on its own legs. It could be about anything, but it's space that it's all about. And the concept of the overview, I think, is just so important. So, Miho, how has space changed your perspective, for instance? Because that's what this record really is all about.
Mm.
It's about the implications of space, as ever about what's down here more than just what's out there. So I'm curious if your research has changed the way that you look at things.
Yeah, I mean, in very various ways. I mean, I like to start with the story that I wanted to get into the field because I wanted to find life on, other planets or planets orbiting other stars, not just the sun. And I think the way we, I guess the way we ingest it is a big discussion at the moment because I think we are nearing the point where we might start to find signatures that may be related to life on, whether it's like on the moons of planets of the solar system or somewhere else. And it just pushes us to think about the narrative. What's the narrative? How are we going to introduce these discoveries to the world? And I think it really pushes us to really think about what's our place in the universe. So in many ways, I mean, it's not something that I think about on a day-to-day basis while I'm doing my job, but it is the fact that we are constantly discovering other things and also the reminder of what we are, like how fragile our Earth is, um, how lucky in a way we are to be living and then doing all these discoveries. I think that's kind of the largest or the biggest perspective that I can get from the work that I do.
Mm.
Um,
I
I think
mean,
especially these days when we're thinking about all the things that are going on in terms of like climate change and big natural disasters. I think it's just a constant reminder of like this precious earth that we have,
Mm.
and me looking outward because the one thing that I'm not looking at is the earth. It's literally doing space science and not looking at the earth, but it's a constant reminder of how lucky we are to have life on earth, really.
Mm. Absolutely. Mark, a final thought?
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Stephen lands in the zeitgeist. I mean, we're talking to lots of people every day saying, "Oh, space is popular again. Space is coming back." I think there's an interesting sort of it's almost a Dunning-Kruger effect thing, right? There's lots of people who think they like space, but the idea, there's lots of pretty pictures, there's spaceships being launched. I can go there, I can live there, I can use the resources, I can colonize it, I can go out into the universe. I think that the deeper you get into the subject, the more you realize that almost none of that is actually true. And that kind of childlike awe about space somehow in some people turns into this idea that it's kind of our destiny. We're bound to go there. And science fiction, and we talk about science fiction a lot on Uplink as well. It, Science fiction is in some ways much like the overview. It is a way of talking about the human condition by placing humans outside of an ordinary world. And so it should be with space, for me at least. The more I understand about space, the more I realize, just as Miho said, that this planet is the one we live on. It's the one we're symbiotic with. It's not to say we won't put our boots on Mars or that humans may go to other moons in the solar system, but to live there, to thrive there, I mean, this is nonsense. And, the more I know about the universe, the more it tells me, no, just, not be happy with where you are, but for God's sake, take care of it because it's pretty much all you're going to have for a long time in the future. Mars is no plan B for human beings. It really isn't, despite some people.
Can't think of anyone you're thinking of, Mark, but yeah, I'm
And
completely with you.
can I say one last thing as well? Because we're talking about music as well, and for me, that's something that is really inspiring about artists, people who create the fact that with the limitation that we have in terms of the physical limitation of us, we are able to transport ourselves as a species creatively. Music can transport us. Paintings can transport us, and in a way, we can discover other worlds in our minds. And it's something that is often forgotten because we're trying to just like as Mark said, colonize other planets. But we, even within the limitation of our Earth, we are traveling. And I think that's something that we owe to people who create
Absolutely.
and our human nature.
And look at the wonderful group of people it's all brought together. Jerry, a final thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to say actually, um, what Mark said about space, and people sort of the way people can view it. Stephen actually said that in the cover feature we did when he was on the cover of Prog for this magazine. He actually said, people think of space as sort of this fun place because we've seen that in films, right? And most people don't have the knowledge that you and Miho both have about space, right? And he said people have this kind of warped perspective, but space isn't like that. It's cold, it's frightening, it's death. And that really resonated with me from something he said. Now he's about a year younger than me, so he would have been a teenager when Carl Sagan, who you mentioned when Cosmos was on television in the UK. Now, for me, that was my first real kind of the window opening to real space, having been inspired by Star Wars movies and Space 1999 and things like that. This was real. It wasn't frightening, and it was death because it was, it was for general TV consumption. But yeah, that I'm sure, because of his age, must have inspired Stephen. I'm sure he was watching that. I know, obviously, Alex and I are both Sagan nuts. I've got the book. I've got the record album.
Well, that's the thing, of course. One more drinking game thing. A toast to Vangelis, of course,
Uh,
whose music is a very important part. And Stephen, I know, is a big fan of Vangelis. And
Also, when Stephen sort of he explained the concept to me, and he said, I was having a chat with Alex, and this came up. And I said to him, I said, well, it's funny you should say that, because one thing that resonated, obviously, we now have commercial ventures to the boundaries of the atmosphere. And people, who can pay a lot of money are getting a taste, a small taste. The one thing that really resonated with me was William Shatner's response to what I later learned was the overview effect, was that he looked back on Earth and he saw death, and it scared him, and he didn't enjoy it like he thought he was going to. And I kind of mentioned that to Steve, and I've subsequently seen that explanation from him in interviews. But I think I think it's so timely, because you do have these commercial ventures. You do have somebody over in America who spouts a lot of
we don't
rubbish,
get points for mentioning him on. There's no drinking game points for naming him. So
but it's in the public conscience. It's not just music. People are more interested in space these days.
And I think, Jerry, as a point that was made earlier in this last 30 minutes, it's wonderful to see a record that is so defiant of commercial expectation, that is so almost blatantly running in the opposite direction of everything we're supposed to be doing when it comes to making everything immediate and in the now. Something that is doing that well, I think, is affirmation that there's an audience for that, and there's an audience for this as well. It's been such an genuine pleasure to be back on Uplink, and to be joined by yourself and Miho. Honestly, has just been a fantastic thing. So yeah, absolutely. Well, it won't be the last time. So we'll be back with Uplink. The overview is out now. Miho, Jerry, Mark, what a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.